I have got 4 examples here. Now, these are examples that in my teaching journey I've come across, and also my dear husband, who is a senior mathematics teacher, he helped me put together our senior example so that I can show you that this scaffolding framework, the way that I'm going to show you today about giving feedback, it is not something that is based on a year level. This is a consistent approach that you can use in any year level, in any subject that you walk into, because we're not focusing on the task. Remember, that's summative feedback. We're focusing on how students solve problems in front of them. That's a formative feedback. So for our lower primary school example, you could see this anywhere from prep to grade 3, but this example is specifically from a year 1 class. And the year 1 curriculum, as a teacher, this is what I have to know. I have to know that students will use comprehension strategies to build their literal and their inferred meaning about key events, ideas, and information in texts that they listen to, that they view, and they read. So as a teacher, I then create a task that is based on the kids' zone of proximal development. So here's the learning task that we've come up with. Students are going to listen to a short story, the Gruffalo, and then they will draw a picture of that main character. And then they're going to write one sentence about what that character did. So that's the example. If you're working in a prep to year 3 setting, I want you to remember that example in your head as we go through this presentation. However, if you work in a year 4 to 6 classroom, this example might resonate with you a little bit more. I want you to pretend that you're in a maths classroom. Now, as a teacher, I've got curriculum that I've got to plan with, and you can see it there. Students need to recall multiplication facts up to 10 times 10 and the related division fact. So as a teacher, I plan the learning task to meet that curriculum requirement. So I'm going to get students to complete a multiplication game in pairs. They're going to use some flashcards or some game cards and a whiteboard to solve problems. So if you're in a year 4 to 6 space, that example might resonate with you. Let's move up into the secondary space in a middle high school classroom. We're going to pretend that we're in a year 7 to 9 class, and we're going to use comprehension strategies to interpret and analyze information and ideas, comparing content from a variety of textual sources. So we're in an English classroom. And as a teacher, I now plan a task for students to meet that curriculum requirement. So I'm going to get my students to compare 2 newspaper articles that are written about the same event. Okay, I'm going to find something that's local to them at the time, and I'm going to give them the 2 articles. And I'm going to say, I want you to identify bias and I want you to identify perspective in these 2 articles. Where is this author coming from and where is that author coming from? Because we want to teach kids to make sure that they are interpreting and analyzing information, not just believing everything they read. All right, so if you're in a year 7 to 9 space, helping supporting students, I want you to hold on to that example. And then for our senior teaching assistants, if you happen to be in a mathematics classroom, you know the strain on the brain that mathematics takes. But for this example, I've taken this out of the VCE General Maths curriculum. So students need to use percentages and proportional reasoning to solve practical problems involving discounts, markups, and GST. So again, as a teacher, I've created a learning task for this. So students are going to calculate the sale prices of items that have 25% discounts, and they're also going to add the 10% GST. So you can see in these examples here, we've got quite a spread of content and we've got quite a spread of ability that is required to do the tasks. But what I want you to do is just pick the one that resonates with you the most. And remember that as we go through the scaffolding framework, because I'm going to do my best to deliver in a way that meets the needs of prep to year 12 teaching assistants. but you will have to also use a little bit of your own sort of reasoning to go, okay, I know she used that example, but in my setting, it would look like this. So without further ado, let's jump into the scaffolding framework and we will explore an example for each step along the way. So welcome to the scaffolding framework. It looks like this. So when we are interacting with students and we're in class with them, I try to always make sure that I'm doing one of these 5 things. And more specifically, I try to avoid one of them and only focus on the other 4. So hopefully by the end of today, you will also be avoiding one of these. Now, firstly, the first step in scaffolding is called self-scaffolding. Now, this is when a student can actually plan and problem solve their way through their learning and do it on their own. They don't need to ask for help. They know how to problem solve along the way. Now, as a teacher, if all of my students were doing this, I would then know that the learning task that I've made is actually too easy. So it's good to have students that are self-scaffolding, but if they're all in that space, then that's too easy. So there should be a bit of a range here of kids at different points. So you've got your kids that are self-scaffolding. They know how to problem solve and make their way through. And on the right-hand side, you can see the little symbol is under the S because the student is taking complete ownership and is completely independent in that process. And there's no step toward the teacher or the teaching assistant for help. Now, the next level of our scaffolding framework is called prompting. Now, this is when a student needs a prompt to connect the new learning with what they already know, so their prior learning. So they just need the slightest little nudge to go, well, remember what we learned? And this part is new. Oh, that's right. It's just a prompt to go, no, remember we learnt this? Connect that learning together. Now, that prompt is a small thing. It's the smallest thing we can do as an adult in the classroom to actually help the student. And on the right-hand side, you can see we've taken one step towards the teacher helping us or the teaching assistant, but the student is still mostly independent in what they're doing. They will then take that little prompt and that, yep, I'm right to go now. I can keep going. At the next level, we call that cluing. Now, this is where a student gets a clue from someone else to help them work out what to do next. They could get the clue from a peer. They could get the clue from maybe if they're working with AI and it prompts them what to do next in their learning, or it could be a clue from a teacher or a teaching assistant in the classroom with them. So you can see that that one is right down the middle when it comes to whose responsibility and who is independent here. The student is still independent somewhat, but without the clue, they're actually stuck. So the teacher actually needs to be able to step in, or whoever's giving the clue steps in and goes, oh, I know how to give you a clue that's going to help you move on with your learning. Now, the fourth part of our scaffolding framework is called modeling. Now, as teachers, we do this a lot, especially when we're introducing a new topic. We will model the correct way to do something, especially in your English and maths classrooms, sciences as well. And there are other subjects which actually lend itself to kids exploring themselves. But I'm talking when we need to model how to do something because we need the student to get it right. And this is where the student needs to watch how to do a part of a task. So we're actually going to model that for them. So you can see we're now getting a lot closer to the teacher on our scale. The student is not really taking the lead on their learning. It's mostly teacher heavy or teaching assistant heavy. And the student is simply watching and paying attention so that then they can take back what they've learnt and repeat it themselves. And finally, in our scaffolding framework, we have correcting. And this is where the student is told the answer and they're told how to do something.